I'm Bargain Counter Argument, also known as Sock Marionette, here on YouTube and also on Instagram. And I am a middle-aged lady who wears tiaras and talks about books and related topics. So if that's interesting to you, then like, comment, share, subscribe, or not. I am not the boss of you. Now this video has been a while in the making because I belong to a Discord book club, which is the Tea and Biscuits book club. And I think it was back at mid-December, there was a call for people to submit 12 recs for 12 friends, or 12 recs by 12 friends. The idea was that you would submit a list of 12 books. It didn't have to be 12, whatever you had to offer. And then people could maybe each month read recommendations from a different person. Well, it took me a while to get my act together just on making my list, and then I presented it in a live stream, and then when I went to post the live stream, apparently it was fine during the event itself, but when I went to post the playback, I noticed that the audio was kind of distorted, and I also know that some people would maybe prefer to watch something that's not a live stream. So I'm going to do a dedicated video just for that. The 12 recs, I mean. Okay, we're gonna see how long I can go before I run out of storage on my phone, because that's an issue. Okay, so I'm presenting these books. I have 12 books and two sort of honorable mentions, extra recs. I am presenting these in the order in which they take place chronologically. Not the publication order, but the order of, so we're starting with some medieval action and then moving forward up until I have one modern rec, one contemporary rec, or two, depending on how you count. Okay, so we're going to start off with, this is actually both contemporary and medieval because it is time travel shenanigans, and that is Until Forever by Joanna Lindsey, and I am fortunate enough to have the gold foiled edition with the embossed lettering and the step back. Yeah, this is an Elaine Diolo. That is Fabio. And some lady who's not Fabio. Anyway, so this actually was published in 1995, and it starts in a contemporary, from 1995 obviously, situation with a woman who actually ends up time traveling, and she spends some time in France and the UK in the Middle Ages. Particularly this autumnal scene takes place during an interlude before the Battle of Hastings, so that would have been 1066. And so, yeah. I think what I'm going to do, rather than read the summaries with each book, I'm going to go through all of the books and then I'll read the summaries, and that will be at the end. So, and I'll have time markers in the description so that you can jump to any books that intrigued you if you want to find out more. Okay, so that's that one. Now, also medieval, but moving forward some time. This is around 1216. Excuse me, 1316. Yeah, 1316. This is To Touch the Sun. This is a Harlequin historical that was published in 1991. And this is a really, really interesting artifact, both of 1991 and of 1991. And it is about, it's a captor captive, and it's about two knights, one of whom was actually born female, but nobody realizes that. Even her own brother has forgotten that he ever had a sister, or he remembers he had a sister, but he thinks she died. So this is really intriguing, and while it's not quite there in terms of 2025 standards for how we talk about non-binary people or trans people, I think she's really more he, they. They, for example, they pronouns aren't used. She pronouns are used quite aggressively. However, for 1991, and considering that the woman who wrote this, Barbara Leigh, at the time was already, I think in her 50s at least, maybe even a little older, this is a remarkable piece for Harlequin Historical number 98. So for the times in which it was written and the circumstances under which it was published, it's really remarkable, and in many ways holds up pretty well today. Again, I'll be reading the summary at the end. For historical romance, I think there's an argument to be made in either direction. This was published in 1972, and it is a reincarnation kind of story. And the contemporary parts take place in 1968, and then the historical parts take place in 1552 to 1559. And this one, I have been reliably informed, is actually available on Kindle Unlimited. So if you're interested, it's reincarnation, there is priest, tormented priest vibes, and all that good stuff. So, yeah. Green darkness, I mean, the darkness part is pretty accurate, so be warned. Okay, now we're jumping forward to oh dear. I lost my piece of paper that explains what this book is. This is To Beguile a Beast by Elizabeth Hoyt. It takes place in 1768, and page past all the rave reviews to find copyright 2009. And this is also a step back. It's a very loose Beauty and the Beast retelling. Like, if I hadn't already known that it was supposed to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, I would not have necessarily realized that. It does have some thematic elements in it that are similar to, well, I mean, it's based on Beauty and the Beast, so of course. So I really liked this one, and yeah, again, summaries at the end. Okay, moving forward. Okay, Beguile a Beast, okay. The Paid Companion by Amanda Quick. This is a Regency, and it was published in 2004, and it very much harks back to Amanda Quick's the one-word title series she did in the 90s. You know, there's like Rendezvous and Seduction, Surrender, and various one-word titles like this. This is, The Paid Companion does not have a one-word title. And this is 1816, so it's Regency. And I don't normally like Regency. This is, I think, this is pretty much the only Regency on the list. And, but I do like this one. It is a very exciting romp, and it's a lot of fun, and I really like the main characters. Ooh, again, variable lighting, because Connecticut. It's beautiful, but kind of difficult to work with. Okay, and now we're moving forward to the United States in 1867. So, Reconstruction after the Civil War, Until Tomorrow by Jill Marie Landis. And this is a road trip kind of story where this guy finds a baby and hires a woman to help him bring the baby back to its relatives. I think it's the baby's a boy, his relatives, from Kansas to Alabama. And it is a content warning because it is Reconstruction era in the South, and so there were a lot of former Confederates who were really getting into their feelings about that, about having lost the war and about the end of slavery. So there is copious use, I wouldn't, there is use of the N-word and violence toward people of African American descent. This is not presented in a sympathetic light. In fact, our hero is a veteran of the Civil War, but even though he's from the South, he fought for the Union. So, yeah, so just be warned about that. Okay. Also, after the Civil War, the 1860s, 1870s, but taking place in California and Washington. The Tiger's Woman by Celeste de Blasis, I don't know how she pronounces it. And this was published in 1981. And content warning for this is that she is a survivor of CSA, childhood sexual. Yeah. Let me try this again. Okay, we have The Tiger's Woman by Celeste, I believe it's de Blasis, it might be de Blasis. Takes place in the 1860s going into the 1870s starts in San Francisco, but mostly takes place in Seattle and environs. And it does have a dark subject matter, content warning for, she is a survivor of her father did not treat her as a father ought to treat a daughter. Let's just put it that way. And his reaction, he has a moment where his reaction is pretty yikes, but it's because he's just trying to fully understand what happened. And yeah. For 1981, and for his being a product of his own times, it's not too bad. But you should be warned that that is an element of the book. And then moving into 1876, Mesmerized by Candace Camp. This was published in 2003, and it is the first book of the Mad Moreland series by Candace Camp. And it's just a lot of fun. And it is a step back. Yeah. The fire is not because they were having a s'mores party that got out of hand. All right, and take a break here for a pause that refreshes. Okay, now we're moving forward to 1893 with Deceptive Desires by Shira Stevens. And this was published in 1987. It's very short. It is essentially, it is a Western Gothic. It takes place in Montana shortly after the territory became a state. And it's first person, very much Gothic, if you can tell by the cover. And of course, like any Gothic, it kind of depends on the female main character being naive and kind of a bit of a ninny in order to, you know, preserve the mystery or the Gothic aspect of it. That's fun for me. So yeah, if you want a Western Gothic, that's the way to go. Okay, now, whoa! I might have to refilm this. I don't want to do that. Now we're jumping all the way forward to 1960, which is, I'm told that 1960 is kind of the outer edge of when you can have a novel be considered historical. In that case, I cheated big time with my next one after this one, but this is it. You Should Be So Lucky, which is a queer baseball romance. And this dude's a baseball player. This dude's a journalist who is suddenly being forced to become a sports journalist, even though that's not his usual beat. And friendship, romance, shenanigans ensue. So it's got all the stuff I love. Queer baseball romance, 1960. Yeah. It's by Sebastian and was published in 2024. So just last year. It's hard to say that, even though it's January. Okay. This one's another time travel one. One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. It's time travel, so there's a bit that's contemporary. It was published in 2021. Well, most it is contemporary, essentially, but we do have a time traveler from the 1970s. And this is a sapphic romance. So that's very cool. And it has a voyage of self-discovery for the contemporary character and this sort of time travel stuff for the character from the 1970s. Fun times. And then finally, a contemporary. Oh, more editing magic will be called for. I do have a couple of honorable mentions to drop in here. And one is, if you're looking for a 19th century romance that largely takes place in a high seas kind of environment, island environment, because pirates, who doesn't love pirates? Captive of My Desires by Joanna Lindsey. Do not confuse it with Prisoner of My Desire by Joanna Lindsey. I'm going to be doing a video about these two books in comparison with each other in a bit. But for the nonce, so just for now, you just need to know that it is a pirate romance, as you can tell by this very intriguing step back. And yeah, that's good if you like that kind of thing. And then another magical realism time travel kind of thing, Believe by Victoria Alexander. Also a step back. Now, all of this artwork would suggest that it's a Christmas story. There's a fleeting reference to Christmas, but basically it's not. And it is magical realism, time travel, like Merlin is involved. And it takes place in contemporary times, and this was published in 1998. And then she ends up traveling to this sort of fantasy medieval kind of situation and meeting Sir Galahad. So if you like that, that's fun. Okay, finally, a contemporary, but it is, again, with the magical realism, so it is contemporary, but there's a little bit beyond that. So it's about a woman who ends up in this, what she thought was a fictional town of her favorite small town romance series. So, okay. So those are my 12 recs, and stick around or jump ahead to any of the summaries that you think. Okay, so that was those were my 12 recommendations plus 2. So stick around if you want to hear me read the summaries for each of these books. That'll be a very exciting time. So otherwise, thank you for your attention and have a good day or night. Okay, this is the really exciting part of the video where I just read plot synopses. I might add some commentary of my own if I think the plot synopses aren't particularly telling the whole story. Well, obviously they're not, but if I think there's more information that you might want. So once again, I will put the time codes in the description box so that you can skip ahead to whatever book you find most interesting and you don't have to sit through the whole thing trying to figure it out. So this one, so again, we're starting with when they take place, earliest to latest, except that some of these are time travel. So, for example, Until Forever, which is going to be the first one, is time travel that takes place partially in the mid-90s, 1990s, and partially in medieval times. But it's the oldest setting, 1066, when they're time traveling, that I'm going to start with. I mean, that's why I'm starting with them. I can stop explaining now, anytime. Okay, again, Until Forever by Joanna Lindsey. From the shadows of the past, prim and beautiful Professor Rosaline White clutches her new prized possession, a 1,000-year-old Scandinavian sword. And suddenly, a dream stands before her, a magnificent Viking warrior sworn to satisfy Rosaline's every desire. Until Forever. Accursed for untold centuries, mighty Thorn is now enslaved to a woman. Yet it is Rosaline who is the true prisoner, held willing captive by a handsome barbarian who sweeps her back to the ancient past on a journey of sensual discovery. But only by banishing him from her life forever can Rosaline free Thorn from immortality's chains, forcing her to make a devastating choice that will either imperil their future or preserve a love more powerful than time. Okay, that makes it sound like he's a bit more roughshod than he really is. He's traveled a lot during time traveled a lot, so he's actually not like, he's kind of trying to boss her around a little bit, but that's more because he's a warrior and she isn't than because he's like thinks that's how male-female relationships should go. Okay, next up is To Touch the Sun by Barbara Leigh. This is the one about, it was published in 1991 and written by an older American writer, and it has a remarkably progressive attitude toward gender identity than you would expect to find in a Harlequin historical published in 1991. Yeah. Beloved captive, to be a knight, chivalrous in deed and courageous in battle, was all that Drew had ever wished for. Dubbed Sir Drew, she had sworn to serve her king and seek revenge against her enemy, Connaught. Connaught! She had vowed to slay the treacherous knight, yet one look into the depths of his fire-blue eyes and she knew she could never kill him. Though she had captured him fairly on the field of battle, it was Drew who was completely in his power, and she shuddered to think what the proud Connaught would do when he discovered that the lad who had defeated him was nothing more than a woman. Well, that's making it sound much more reactionary. That's making it sound more reactionary than it really was. Drew's main problem is that they think knights shouldn't sleep with other knights. Doesn't necessarily think of it in terms of like men shouldn't sleep with men or men should sleep with women or anything like that. It's more like that. And the when Drew does think of their biological sex and the dangers it poses, it's more a fear of assault than anything else. And yeah, so it's not entirely where we are in 2025 in terms of gender identity representation, but it is remarkable for when and how and where it was written. Okay, so that was that, and then we're moving into the 16th century, 1552 to 1557, but another one that, this isn't time travel, this is reincarnation, so I mean it's kind of time travel, and the contemporary parts take place in 1968 because this was published in 1972. Okay. An unforgettable story of undying love stretching from the 16th century to the 20th, green darkness weaves together mysticism, suspense, mystery, and romance. Richard Marsden's marriage to a young American woman named Celia slowly turns tragic as he withdraws into himself and she suffers a debilitating emotional breakdown. A wise doctor realizes that Celia can escape her past only by reliving it. Celia goes back 400 years to her former life as a beautiful and ill-fated servant. Through her eyes, we see Tudor England torn by religious strife. We meet King Edward, Queen Mary, and Queen Elizabeth and experience all the pageantry, lustiness, and cruelty of the age. Although Celia and the man she adores can't escape the horrifying consequences of their love, fate offers them another chance for redemption. So, if you're doing Violet Cat's Broaden Your Horizons challenge, we've got working class. So, now, okay, and now we're jumping ahead to the 18th century, 1768. This is Elizabeth Hoyt to Beguile a Beast. Also a step back. Can a wounded beast trust a beauty with a past to tame his most secret desires? Reclusive Sir Alistair Munro has hidden in his castle ever since returning from the colonies, scarred inside and out. But when a mysterious beauty arrives at his door, the passions he's kept suppressed for years begin to awaken. Running from past mistakes has taken legendary beauty Helen Fitzwilliam from the luxury of the Seton to a crumbling Scottish castle and a job as a housekeeper. Yet Helen is determined to start a new life, and she won't let dust, or a beast of a man, scare her away. Beneath Helen's beautiful facade, Alistair finds a courageous and sensual woman, a woman who doesn't back away from his surliness or his scars. But just as he begins to believe in true love, Helen's secret past threatens to tear them apart. Now both beast and beauty must fight for the one thing neither believed they could ever find, a happy ever after. Yeah, look at how hideously scarred he is. Just, no wonder he's reclusive. Anyway, it's also single mom. Helen's a single mom. Sort of. Okay, so that was that, and then we're moving. So now jumping ahead to 1816, the Regency era, we have The Paid Companion by Amanda Quick. The Earl of St. Maron needs a woman. His intentions are purely practical. He simply wants someone sensible and suitably lovely to pose as his betrothed for a few weeks among polite society. He has his own agenda to pursue, and a false fiancé will keep the husband hunters at bay while he goes about his business. The easiest solution is to hire a paid companion. After all, the sorry women who must accept such employment are sure to be grateful for any favor. However, finding the right candidate proves more of a challenge than he expected until he encounters Miss Eleanora Lodge. Her dowdy attire and pinned-up hair cannot hide her fine figure and the fire in her golden eyes, and her unfortunate circumstances and dreams of a life of independence make the Earl's generous offer undeniably appealing. But Eleanora is unsure what this masquerade might entail, for St. Maron is clearly hiding a secret or two, and things seem oddly amiss in his gloomy Rain Street home. She is soon to discover that his secrets are even darker than his decor, and that this lark will be a far more dangerous adventure than she's been led to believe. And Arthur, Earl of St. Marin, is making a discovery as well, that the meek and mild companion he'd initially envisioned has become, in reality, a partner in his quest to catch a killer, and an outspoken belle of the ball who stirs a wild passion in his practical heart. It's fun because they're actually both very practical people, so that's kind of something I admire. It's practical people also finding passion. Okay, and going to 1867, the United States. This is immediate reconstruction, which I talked about in the body of the video. Again, I don't think I showed that this is a step back, because it's a step back. Women of the Prairie. Alone on her Kansas homestead, Kara James passed the time making rag dolls and dreamed of a better life in California. Man of the battlefields. Traveling home from the Civil War, Dake Reed came across an ambush wagon and a newborn baby in need of care. Bringing the child to the first house he found across the lonely prairie, Dake turned to Kara, a backwoods young woman who lived by her grandma's sayings and her pioneer instincts. Together they embarked on a journey to fulfill the heart's greatest promises, a place to call home, and a love that lasts forever and a day. So it's funny because he's trying to get her to look after this baby, and she doesn't know how to look after a baby. Neither of them do. Takes him several pages just to figure out which end you put the oatmeal into. That's not true. They're not quite that at odds. Okay, moving forward. Also, 1860s, 1870s, The Tiger's Woman. This is probably pretty hard to find. A love story as deep and primal. A love story as deep and primal as the waters and forests of the Pacific Northwest that form its setting. Here is the new novel by the author of the acclaimed and beloved The Proud Breed, a compelling story that sweeps from San Francisco's Barbary Coast to still frontier Seattle and beyond to the majestic San Juan Islands, where, hidden from the past and a curious world, a hesitant, hard-won love would flower. She called herself Mary Smith and concealed her extraordinary beauty, a beacon to all who would follow, behind widow's weeds. She came to San Francisco in flight from a secret so shattering, a man so dangerous that no disguise could shield her for long. Then she met Jason Drake, the Tiger. Lover, gambler, empire builder, and found sanctuary in a cold bargain. She would be the Tiger's woman in return for his protection so long as he asked no questions about her past. Here was a man at once strong and yet vulnerable, who bore fierce pain and never cried out, whose very being hungered for love, but who would not risk reaching out for it, not from his small son, not from Mary. A man who would... Library packaging, man. I can't see what that says. A man who would not ask for trust, but instead would take her to a private place where slowly she could learn to be free. Free enough to love, free enough to offer her true name. There, on Drake's Island, the woman who called herself Mary would find a new life. There, a tenuous love would grow between the tiger and his woman until the past caught them both to send the world into flame to test the strength and timbre of a very special love. Rich in historical detail, alive with finely drawn, memorable characters, The Tiger's Woman is storytelling at its peak, a magnificent saga of the Pacific Northwest in the years following the Civil War, a splendid evocation of the depths and moods of love, and of its power to transcend even the soul-shattering passions of a terrible past. Okay, and then 1876, Candace Camp. Mesmerized, the first book of the Mad Moreland series. Her cross to bear. All her life, Olivia Moreland has denied her clairvoyant abilities, working instead to disprove the mediums that flock to London. But when Stephen, Lord St. Leger, requests her help in investigating an alleged psychic, she can't ignore the ominous presence she feels within the walls of his ancient estate. Nor can she ignore the intimate connection she feels to Stephen, as if she has somehow known him before. His gift to treasure. The last time he'd lived in Black Hope Hall, Stephen had watched as his elder brother claimed both the family title and the woman he loved. Now, following his brother's death, Stephen reluctantly returns home and finds his family ensconced in scandal. Who is behind his brother's murder? A dark spirit or the psychic who claims to have channeled it? And what is it about psychic investigator Olivia Moreland that awakes his long-dormant passion? As they search for answers, Stephen and Olivia discover that the only way to fight a powerful evil is with a powerful love. It's fun. I mean, there's some serious topics that are broached, but it's fun. And the Mad Morlands, this is all this family of Morlands that are, all kind of eccentric. It's a fun series so far. I've read a couple of the books and enjoyed them very much. Okay, now we're into the Western Gothic, Deceptive Desires by Shira Stevens, set in about 1893 in Montana, but it is a Gothic. Wild land, wild love. When the wind howled across the vast wilderness, lonely young Eliza Edwards desperately feared she heard a warning in its lonesome wail. Beware the fiend who murdered your only brother. Beware the husband who stole your innocence. Beware the lover who had lured you into his savage embrace and seduced your yearning heart. Beware Logan James. The wildly sensuous, romantically suspenseful novel of forbidden passions and deceptive desires. It was fun. I had a good time. Okay, I'm going to mention a couple of these books that were kind of honorable mentions. I don't really know where to put them in, so I'll just do them here. One is Captive Desires by Joanna Lindsey. This is 19th Century Pirates. It's part of the, what is it called? The Mallory series? The Mallory family series? It says The Mallory's Return. I don't know what the official name of the series is, but it's the Mallory family. Okay, Gabrielle Brooks sets sail from England to a Caribbean island in search of her estranged father and encounters a life-altering surprise. Her father is a pirate! After spending 3 wonderful years hunting treasure with him, Gabrielle is dismayed when he decides she must return to London to find a proper husband. His old friend James Mallory will sponsor her in polite society. Gabrielle is escorted to balls and parties by James's wife, Georgina, and her brother, Drew Anderson, a dashing American sea captain and fun-loving rogue. When Drew embroils Gabrielle in a scandal the night before he's to sail home, the pirate's daughter vows revenge by commandeering Drew's ship and taking him prisoner. But as passion runs high on their sea voyage, it becomes difficult to tell who is truly the captor and who is the captive. So you've got pirates and high seas shenanigans and fish out of water, and it's a blast. Okay, and the other honorable mention, this is kind of like some bonus books for people who like these sorts of stories. This is Believe by Victoria Alexander. It's the non-Christmassy book about time travel. All she had to do was believe. Tessa St. James thinks that true love is nothing more than a fairy tale, and she is absolutely certain she will never encounter someone worthy of her attention until she meets her knight in shining armor. His eyes are blue, the set of his chin is defiant, and he carries himself with unquestioned confidence. And when he kisses her, he sends a wicked desire through her body. Tessa, the beautiful skeptic, has no choice but to join forces with this man. Together they begin a quest that might restore her faith in the power of love, even if it costs both their lives. And happily ever after could only be the stuff of fairy tales after all. So yeah, that's like the magical realism time travel. I covered this in the main body of the video. Okay, so 3 more to go. It's time for the pause that refreshes. That's very refreshing. You Should Be So Lucky by Cat Sebastian. An emotional, slow burn, grumpy sunshine queer romance between the new star shortstop stuck in a batting slump and the reporter assigned to reluctantly cover his first season. The 1960 baseball season is shaping up to be the worst year of Eddie O'Leary's life. He can't manage to hit the ball. His new teammates hate him. He's living out of a suitcase, and he's homesick. When the team's owner orders him to give a bunch of interviews to some snobby reporter, he's ready to call it quits. He can barely manage to behave himself for the length of a game, let alone an entire season, but he's already on thin ice, so he has no choice but to agree. Mark Bailey is not a sports reporter. He writes for the arts page, and these days he's barely even managing to do that much. He's had a rough year and just wants to be left alone in his too-empty apartment, mourning a partner he'd never been able to be public about. The last thing he needs is to spend a season writing about New York's obnoxious new shortstop in a stunt to get the struggling newspaper more readers. Isolated together within the crush of an anonymous city, these two lonely souls orbit each other as they slowly give in to the inevitable gravity of their attraction. But Mark has vowed that he'll never be someone's secret again, and Eddie can't be out as a professional athlete. It's just them against the world, and they'll both have to decide if that's enough. This is kind of a follow-up to We Could Be So Good, I think it was called, which was also very good. Yeah, We Could Be So Good, which is also very good, and set mid-50s, so a few years earlier. Okay, and now we have, this is like another time travel deal. One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, where there's a contemporary person and a person from the 1970s. For cynical 23-year-old August, moving to New York City is supposed to prove her right, that things like magic and cinematic love stories don't exist, and the only smart way to go through life is alone. She can't imagine how waiting tables at a 24-hour pancake diner and moving in with too many weird roommates could possibly change that. And there's certainly no chance of her subway commute being anything more than a daily trudge through boredom and electrical failures. But then there's this gorgeous girl on the train. Jane, dazzling, charming, mysterious, impossible Jane. Jane with her rough edges and swoopy hair and soft smile, showing up in a leather jacket to save August's morning when she needs it most. August's subway crush becomes the best part of her day, but pretty soon she discovers there's one big problem. Jane doesn't just look like an old school punk rocker. She's literally displaced in time from the 1970s, and August is going to have to use everything she tried to leave in her own past to help Jane. Maybe it's time to start believing in some things after all. Casey McQuiston's One Last Stop is a magical, sexy, big-hearted romance where the impossible becomes possible as August does everything in her power to save the girl lost in time. Fun stuff. And then finally, it's actually a contemporary but with magical realism, a novel love story by Ashley Poston or Poston. Love is stranger than fiction. Eileen Elsie Merriweather loves to get lost in a good happily ever after. The fictional kind, anyway. Because at least imaginary men don't leave you at the altar. She feels safe in stories, at home in books, which might be why she's so set on going to her book club's annual retreat this year. She needs good friends, cheap wine, and grand romantic gestures, no matter what. When her car unexpectedly breaks down on the way, she finds herself stranded in a quaint town that seems like it's right out of a novel. Because it is! This place can't be real, and yet she's here in Elloraton, the town from her favorite romance series, where the candy store's honey taffy is always sweet, the local bar's burgers are always a little burnt, and rain always comes in the afternoon. It feels like home. It's perfect and perfectly frozen, trapped in the late author's last unfinished story. Elsie is sure that must be why she's here, to help bring the town to its storybook ending. Except there is a character in Elloraton whom she can't place, a grumpy bookstore owner with mint green eyes, an irritatingly sexy mouth, and impeccable taste in novels. And he does not want her finishing this book, which is a problem because Elsie is beginning to think the town's happily ever after just might be intertwined with her own. So I think if you are looking to get into contemporary romance, this kind of magical realism might intrigue you and also kind of suggest what's out there in terms of small town romance, which is very popular right now for cottagecore type reasons, I think. Well, thank you for your attention. Have a great day or night, and